Hey everyone, Coach Powers. I want to talk today about what I believe is one of the biggest traps that anyone going through benzo withdrawal and recovery can fall into. I see it all the time in all the forums, in all the groups. It's on Reddit, it's on Benzo Buddies, it's everywhere. But somehow it goes under the radar. And some of you have had doctors, maybe even doctors you didn't like, maybe even doctors that had put you in this situation give you clues to this. And what I'm talking about is being locked in fight or flight, right? And this is where it gets tricky, guys, because there's two different explanations that we're looking at in the benzo community when we're trying to understand this problem with benzos and how do we all get so sick. And one is, and this is the prevailing one, the prevailing narrative, that is, it's all chemical damage, receptor damage, neurological damage, or not, we have that benzo-induced neurological dysfunction. You know, the idea that it's just some kind of crazy brain injury, right? And that explains all the wild symptoms and all the wackiness and all the unpredictability. It all can be under the umbrella of just a brain injury. That's one. Now let's revisit another alternative, right? And that is, well, let's go with a little bit of the first one. Sure, there's a brain injury coming off the drug, receptor damage, and all of that chemical stuff. That's so true. But let's say that's only half the battle, right? So we're going to meet you halfway in the middle there. What's the other 50% at least? That is the very real response of this fight or flight center of our brain, for one. It's also things like the manifestation of mental illnesses as a result of prolonged, acute, severe stress, trauma, you know, um, reducing uh, other good brain chemicals, serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, natural GABA, right? For example, endorphins. And what that breeds is mental illness. It quite literally breeds mental illness. The hippocampus, the amygdala, those deep brain fight or flight center, components to the brain actually begin to shrink down and they kind of dwindle down a bit there. So things like neuroplasticity can actually rebuild, add up to 10,000 new neurons a day to this part of the brains, especially creating new pathways. All of these things are so important to reverse engineering this process of what went wrong here. And again, what went wrong isn't just the chemical part, but it's the brain's reaction to the chemical part. So let's step back. What is GABA? Right? GABA is the neurotransmitter, so to speak. Excuse me, the Zen neurotransmitter. I meant to say it is. I look at it as sort of like the governor switch of the fight or flight center. So you have the parasympathetic, the sympathetic, sympathetic being the gas pedal to the fight or flight, the parasympathetic being the brake pedal, right? Coming off GABA, coming off a GABA supplement, or especially a benzodiazepine, which is like a enormously condensed amount of GABA, the brain does adjust, right? New neurons are formed and openings in those neurons that take in the chemical. Like it has an impact, just like it would with any other drug, even sex, watching TV, gambling. Like the brain changes according to the chemistry and the influences of these things. But GABA is very unique. It's not like dopamine. Dopamine's work, reward, feeling good. GABA is kind of like a false message to the limbic system saying we're safe. Even when the limbic system says, I don't think we're safe. Even when the limbic system isn't sleeping or it's battling health anxiety and phobias and fears and anxieties and all of these things, GABA is a way of sort of speaking the language to the limbic system saying, nope, we're fine. And we put enough GABA in somebody, they could walk right up and pet a grizzly bear, right? Fearless. Just walk up, pet a grizzly bear, swim with a shark, right? No fear, no anxiety response. We're just kind of tranquilizing that part of the brain. Now, when you come off a drug, the opposite happens of what that drug did. So, for example, if you were on a pain pill for extended amount of time, coming off pain meds does what? Makes pain go through the roof, right? Pain becomes much more excitable and severe for a short period of time anyway. Benzos are no different. as you're coming off this anti-anxiety, really anti-stress drug, your stress levels, your anxiety levels are going to shoot up dramatically, right? And part of that fight or flight response is this cascade of physiological, chemical further responses, right? Like I said before, your blood pressure goes up, your heart rate increases, your bronchioles and your lungs dilate and open so more oxygen can get in your blood. The blood pumps faster and harder to get to the extremities into the brain. Your brain becomes sharper, more clear, starts moving faster. This is why when you're anxious and in benzo withdrawal, partly your mind is sped up so fast, right? Because it's, think about it, if you see a grizzly bear in the wild and you got seconds to respond, pretty damn important that you can compute a lot of things that might save your life in a very short matter of time. So all of this stuff is actually designed as a fight or flight response to save our life, you know. And what goes wrong is, you know, this process is great when there's a grizzly bear. See a grizzly bear, encounter some danger, fight or flight kicks in, you escape, get back to safety, parasympathetic kicks back in, slows everything back down. You come out of that fight or flight. The problem with benzos is it keeps sending a signal that the bear is there, the bear is there, the bear is there. And so this part of the brain just keeps reacting like almost like a faulty smoke detector just keeps going off over and over and over again, pumping us full of cortisol, pumping us full of norepinephrine, adrenaline, pumping us, more importantly, pumping us full of a intense signal of fear, of impending doom. Fear is not even the right word, really. Impending doom, meaning we feel something really bad's happening or about to happen. Something is wrong, right? Think about it. If you deal with health anxiety, how often do you feel that something's wrong, man? Something's wrong. Something's got to be wrong. Like this is coming from a chemical place. Where it gets wonky is when the benzo community, it's so much of the blind leading the blind. It's fear leading fear. It's an echo chamber of fear and what could go wrong in all of this. And so this part of the brain that's sort of this limbic system that's responding automatically to the chemical withdrawal, who's rattling and getting wildly excitable. Um, then the narratives start to come in. Oh, did you hear about John Doe? He was, you know, he couldn't make it through benzos. And did you hear about Sally? She was off benzos for 3 months or 3 years, and then suddenly, you know, she was back at acute and almost died. Like all these horrific things. You can't eat things and you can't drink things and you can't have stimulation and therapy doesn't work. And like it's just this breeding ground uh for the limbic system to escalate into crisis. Now, remember, the limbic system doesn't just go from 1 to 100. There's an escalation. And what I mean by this is, say you're in the woods camping and you're gathering wood for a fire for the night, and you hear a twig snap in the distance. You look about 100 yards away, big 1,000-pound grizzly bear walking around with her cubs. Now, it doesn't see you yet, right? But you see it. Oh my God, look at that thing. There's no wall between us. There's no guns. There's no nothing. This thing could easily see me, turn around, charge, and be over here mauling me in seconds. So your limbic system recognizes that, jumps in. What's it do first? It doesn't make you panic. It doesn't hit you necessarily full of a extreme dose of fight or flight. It hits you with what we call hyperarousal. It's a low dose of fight or flight. So you get this sensation of like almost like you drink a few cups of coffee, right? It's like I say if sitting in a car and having a panic attack is like sitting in a car and smashing that gas pedal down to the floor. The RPMs just go through the roof. I mean, that motor is revving full speed. That's a panic attack. That's a full-blown adrenaline response. Hyperarousal is more like resting a heavy foot on a gas pedal. It's just sort of revving it up a bit, keeping it idling high, keeping the motor warm. You know, you're ready to go, but you may not have to. So you're just kind of you're warmed up for what could happen. Well, how does hyperarousal, what does that look like? It means a little bit of elevated blood pressure, um, a little faster beat heartbeats. It means all your senses become a little more in tuned, a little more heightened, a little more aware. Your brain speeds up a little bit, metabolism and all kinds of things start to happen. Like I said, it's a cascade of a lot of physiological dynamic changes. And that starts to happen on a very small level, but it's enough. It's noticeable. And with hyperarousal, especially when you've been sitting in anxiety and withdrawal, this breeds with those withdrawal symptoms like a match made in hell. So all the twitching and the tingling and the buzzing and the vibration and the weird sensations and all of that is sitting there. And also worth mentioning, because you saw that bear, what else are you going to have? Not just a cascade of physiological, right? You're going to have a elevation of fear. You're going to feel that, ooh, that's dangerous. Now, this is evolution. Thank God that exists. Um, now let's talk about the escalation. That bear then turns and sees you. Limbic system goes up a little more. Oh boy, now things have gotten a little bit more real. Let's say the bear not only sees you, starts walking towards you. Limbic system escalates even further. Oh no, oh no, right? This is getting more real. Now the bear starts barreling towards you. It is running full speed at you. Now the escalation is much greater. And you're trying to compute, should I run? Can I fight? Can I what can I do here? Right? Finally, the bear runs right up on you. It stands up, mighty bear, 10 feet tall, hearing over, looming over you, roaring with its 3-inch, fangs. And now the limbic system is going almost to the ultimate height. It is, I mean, you at this point, you are firing on all cylinders. Now, there's different stages of fight or flight in that response. We call it fight or flight, but there's multiple things. So fight or flight are the first two. Can you fight the bear? Can you run? Well, here the bear is standing above you. You're not going to fight him. 1,000-pound mauling creature of death here. You have no chance to fight him. You can't outrun him. I mean, look how fast he got up on you or she got up on you. What's the next thing you do? You freeze. You just stop moving. Because sometimes that works in nature. If you just stop moving, sometimes predators will not see you as a threat, back off. But what happens when the bear's standing there? You're frozen, but it's not going away. It is. It is angry. It is fixated on you. Next thing you do is you start to fall. You start to friend. You befriend the bear. You go, hey, hey, easy fella, easy. It's okay. This is natural instinct that comes out of us, and those says, please, please, please. You start praying and begging and pleading and trying to make yourself as docile and not as harmless as possible. Essentially, you're pleading with the bear. When that doesn't work, what happens next? Limbic system goes a step further. It says, flop, just fall down, right? And you have no control over this. Your legs will just give out and you will fall onto the ground. And it's almost like you're paralyzed and you will play dead. And it's essentially what it is. The limbic system is now playing dead. Now the bear is standing over you, now it's got to decide, okay, now this person is really not a threat. Should I eat the person? Should I attack it? Should I leave him alone? Let's say the bear goes one step further, starts mauling on you. And by the way, I'm not trying to trigger you. There's something good coming in all this, but it's the best way I can share this information. I just became very aware that this is probably kind of a very horrific scenario that I'm giving you, but it's a metaphor. So let's say the bear then starts really going at you. The limbic system has one last trick up its sleeve, and it says, okay, we've tried everything. We can't fight it. We can't run. We can't befriend it. We've frozen. We've played dead. Nothing is working. And now we're getting eaten. So it's like a last ditch evolutionary insurance policy. The limbic system starts to disassociate us from our trauma. It says, I'm going to, depersonalize, derealization, disassociation starts to set in. And even to a point where this can start to feel very euphoric. People who've experienced great traumas often have reported this. So you disassociate, you may feel some euphoria. It's your brain trying to pull, your limbic system trying to separate you from the trauma as a way to protect you. Really, it's like, oh, let me just disassociate you from this horrific thing and until it's over. Okay. So where does all this play into the fight or flight like I was talking about being locked in fight or flight and all this. Benzos, the trick that it plays on our brain is it is the bear. But yet it isn't, because there really is no imminent danger. It's just horrific withdrawal. It's the brain not realizing what's happening and responding as though it were a grizzly bear. And then us responding to that fear signal of the limbic system, actually feeding back into it and amplifying that signal, because then people around us tell us things. It's not enough to say, oh my God, I feel like in chemical withdrawal that there's this grizzly bear after me. Then someone starts to tell you horrific things, and you read horrific things and all the symptoms, and all of it is just a breeding ground for this limbic system to kind of get confused, think that it's in this ultimate crisis, and then really lock us up, start flooding us with unbelievable symptomology, which, the cortisol, the adrenaline, all of that, which again suppresses the good chemistry, elevates the bad, completely exacerbates our withdrawal. And then the narrative goes on. What if I don't get off this drug? Oh, what if I have to lose my work? What if I get a divorce? What if I need another med? What if I have to go back on the drug? Like, all these things are spiraling. And all the while they seem like small questions to some degree to us, to the limbic system, they're major statements. And all the limbic system is hearing is grizzly bear, grizzly bear, grizzly bear. And so it's going to keep doing what it's designed by nature to do, hitting you with a hell of a fight or flight response, hell of a dose of fear, of imminent danger, right? The sensation, the very real feeling that something horrific is happening, right? So the brain gets confused. So what do we do about all this? A big part of what I do with people is helping them realize and retrain their brain that they are not facing a grizzly bear, that this is, just to understand. I mean, maybe even some of you listening to me now, hearing me say this, I hope that you find a little bit of peace in that and go, oh, interesting. It makes a lot of sense. Yes, that does apply to me. I have been locked in fight or flight. My doctors have said this to me. Um, just the knowing of what's going on in itself oftentimes is enough to give us a little bit of leverage, because we're able to become conscious and step back and say, see, I felt like I was being attacked by the bear, but now I realize that I'm not. It's a chemical withdrawal signal of lie. It's a chemical message of a lie, right? And the limbic system reacting to it. So what do you do? First, stop trying, try your best to stop believing in the lie and just look at it for what it is. It's horrific chemical withdrawal, right? Yeah, it's a little temporary a brain injury that will heal. And now let's add another component to this. What was your pre-existing condition? Did you have health anxiety? Did you have agoraphobia? Did you have insomnia? All these other things that, do you ruminate? Essentially, what we're talking about here at the core is profound rumination, this constant stream of this constant narrative to the limbic system of how bad we really are, how much in danger we really are. But whatever you had there before is going to, like, it's like, a relationship made in hell with the limbic system, because it's old pathways, old responses, old fears feeding into this thing. And then what does the manifestation of, sitting, the manifestation of different disorders or problems that emerge while sitting in benzo withdrawal? What about that? Well, that's going to merge to the problem, right? So we have a threefold problem. We have chemical withdrawal, we have the pre-existing condition, we have the manifested condition. And again, this can escalate the limbic system to a point that it actually becomes locked in fight or flight. Because again, if you're sitting, let's say you're floating in the ocean surrounded by sharks just swimming around you, that is not a time to fall asleep. That is not a time to feel good, right? As long as you're sitting there in the ocean in a life or death situation, surrounded by sharks, your limbic system is going to do what it was trained, so to speak, designed by nature to do. It is going to hit you full of chemicals to keep you alive. It is going to keep you overwhelmed in fear, and you're going to have this response, right? So again, part of reverse engineering this process, if you will, is relearning the trick that's being played on us, learning how to detach from that fear, how to get the rumination back under control and communicate a message of safety back to that limbic system. And the problem is you can't just talk to the limbic system. It doesn't speak our language. In fact, this trying to speak to it oftentimes only makes it more excitable, because it doesn't understand. It just understands. It's almost like it can't hear the words we're saying, but it hears us in distress trying to communicate something. So it almost, lost in translation, if you will. It says, "Oh my God, oh, look at all this energy and pressure this person is putting on themselves to heal, and we must be in real danger." So it just sort of doubles down. The language of the limbic system is sensory. It looks at our senses. It looks at our emotionality. The language of the limbic system is this. It says, "I think we're in danger." How does it communicate that to you? It hits you full of a pulse wave of fear. You get hit with the fear, right? Now it sits back. The limbic system says, "Okay, how are you going to respond to that fear?" How you respond to the fear is everything, my friends. This is the art of and science of beating all anxiety disorders, OCD, all of this stuff. We understand this down to a pretty damn good science at this point. How you speak back to that limbic system is everything. So when it hits you full of fear, if you go running, if you give into emotionality and the fear and the rumination and the maladaptive coping and all of that, all you've succeeded in doing is patting that little limbic system dog on the head and said, "Thank you for barking and alerting me. Yes, there was danger." So what is it going to do in return? It's going to double down. And then if you react again, it's going to triple down, right? And this is how we escalate until finally we are just locked in a horrific state. We feel utterly hopeless. And now we're not just locked in there because of feeling afraid and all this, but now we're starting to, even depending on how long you've been laying in bed and what all you've gone through, like that matters too. People have been laying in bed for several months and they're deconditioned and they're sensitized and they're not eating and they're not sleeping and they have no support group and like all those good neurotransmitters, the dopamine, the oxytocin, the serotonin, the natural GABA, the endorphins, all of that out the window. So it's a breeding ground for mental illness. At the same time, the cortisol and norepinephrine response part of our brain is just on fire. I mean, it's a relationship made in hell, my friends. So if you're interested in knowing more about what to do about this, maybe consider reaching out to me or joining the school or digesting more of my content. I got so much content here, blogs on my website at powersbenzocoaching.com. Um, Help me help you because there is something we can do about this. So again, I want to take us all the way back to the beginning. There's two modes of describing what's happening. A, it's all chemical receptors, benzo withdrawal. It's a big bad boogeyman, and that's it. Or B, it's part of that, and it's part of this other thing that's been happening. Right? Now, you might ask me, "Coach, how do you know it's the other thing?" You know how I know? Because the people that I work with and we implement real strategies, as I'm talking about here, to help de escalate the limbic system, night and day improvements. Right? And I've run that experiment thousands of times at this point. So there's no even question to me. Right? Now, granted, everybody's different. Everybody gets different responses and everybody's story is different, and that's true. But that's why I'm so confident about the content that I'm delivering here today because I've run this experiment so many times. And if it was just chemical or receptor damage or just a brain injury, first off, it doesn't happen to everybody, which is kind of a hole in that a flaw in that theory, right? Like, what about the clients I've had that came off of Klonopin after 20 years and walked right off of it with no problems, were 100% better in a matter of a couple months? Right? What happened with their receptors? What about the clients that I had that were cold turkey and bounced back and healed in a couple months or a couple weeks even? Why didn't their receptors get damaged? Why didn't they go through all of this? So I don't think it's enough to say, that there's a one size fits all or one size explanation for all of this. There's not, right? It's not just receptor damage or uh, chemical imbalance or however you want to paint the picture, right? Sure, there's a physiological drug withdrawal, benzo damage component that we can't deny. And then there's another part. And this other part, it's not foreign, it's not alien, it's not new. It is the basis of actually why we probably were on the benzo in the first place. That's the irony. But, and people say, "Well, but it wasn't that bad before." Well, this was a whole nother different ball game, isn't it? It's a whole different situation here that we're in. So, some things to think about, my friends. And let me know in the comments what you think. I do read a lot of those comments. These days I get really busy and I can't get back to everyone like I used to, but I do read the comments and I try to get back to enough. So if you have some thoughts on this, some experiences with this, share it. Let me know. Okay. Keep your heads up, guys. You're healing. You will heal. And when you get to the other side, tell them Coach Power sent you. I don't want to let myself down myself.